Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Pratik and I'll be taking up the News Today discussion for 21st April. So we have five main news. In the first main news, we have South Korean president visited India. Second news is recent explosion at fireworks unit in Tamil Nadu. Third news is on relevance of ASEAN's partnership model. Fourth news is on world rapidly progressing towards circular economy. And the last news is on India's forest could nearly double their carbon storage capacity by 2100. And in the places in news, we have Japan. Plus, we also have certain quick updates. So let us start with the very first news, that is the South Korean president visited India, and within this visit, there has been a significant development in terms of the special strategic partnership. Now, this topic is part of GS Paper 2, International Relations. And whenever we talk about any major country visiting India or Indian PM visiting any other country, we have to look into some of the important development, such as what has been the major achievement or major declaration as part of the visit. Second, one that would be part of the current affairs. Then we need to understand what is the significance of that particular country for India's national interest. And then we need to understand the geopolitics and geoeconomic importance of that country and the challenges that these countries face. Then finally, we need to understand some of the ways through which we can address our issues. So here, the major outcome of this visit of the South Korean president was it resulted in the joint strategic vision along with other agreements. And this strategic vision will be from 2026 to 2030. Now understand that India and South Korea are not unlike any other neighbor countries. They are special strategic partners. Now India has more than 30 countries with which it has strategic partnership. But there are very few countries with which India has special strategic partnership. These countries include such countries such as Japan, Russia, France, etc. Right? So only a handful of countries are India's special strategic partners, and South Korea is one among them. Now the question comes, what exactly is the relevance of South Korea? See, when it comes to various political and security matters, South Korea and India have various complementarities, especially because of the rise of China. India and South Korea are becoming closer, right? Secondly, it is also very important that the economy of South Korea and India are very complementary in nature. South Korea is hub of shipbuilding, and it is also very advanced when it comes to manufacturing of semiconductors. So South Korea is a very advanced economy in that sense, and India has benefited significantly from that. And moreover that, India and South Korea also have robust defense partnership. So it is also very important for India's defense relations. Then we also know that India and South Korea have also very robust cultural ties in terms of the K-pops and the K-dramas such as Squid Game, which is very much famous all over the world and even in India. So we have seen that India and South Korea have a lot of complementarities. Now let us understand what has been the major outcome under the arrival of the president of South Korea in India. So first thing is the decision or the outcome is in terms of strengthening the foundation of the relation, especially at the political level. So first thing is done is that there will be annual leader level meeting every year, right? So it is going to be like a summit level partnership which India has with countries such as Russia, right? Apart from that, there's also going to be 2+2 dialogue, and there's also going to be a major discussion on industrial and economic policies. Secondly, South Korea has joined the Indian initiative in the Indo-Pacific that is called as Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative. So for India, Indo-Pacific is a very major important area because of the fact that it is a hub or it is a place which is full of maritime trade, and also with respect to the idea of free and open maritime sector. So South Korea joining Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative is a very big win for India. Thirdly, there's also going to be bilateral trade to be doubled to $54 billion by 2030. Again, if you look at the existing bilateral trade, it is around 24, $27. So it is mostly, they want to increase it more than to $54. And this is even more significant because now we have not just started with the increasing the volume of the trade, but it is also to safeguard the supply chain. And for this, there is economic security dialogue, which is for supply chain resilience and for technological cooperation. Then, interestingly, South Korea has also joined India-led International Solar Alliance, and India has joined the initiative of South Korea, which is called as Global Green Growth Institution. Then we have discussed that people-to-people ties in India and South Korea are very robust, and to fructify this, a Mumbai Korea Center is to be launched, where Bollywood and K-dramas and K-pops will be utilized for integrating and to leverage this to build up the soft power in both these countries. Then maritime and shipbuilding, again, a very important component of the relationship. And particularly here, there is going to be partnership in shipbuilding with shared vision. Now, this is important. Voyages, that is vision for operation of yard-assisted growth with efficiency and scale. So South Korea can impart some of the learning that it has understood or gone through with respect to its shipbuilding and logistics sector, and it can increase or improve India's maritime logistics sector as well. Then in terms of technological cooperation, the two countries are also cooperating in the digital bridge, which is going to have cooperation in artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and IT sector. And now because of this range of cooperation, India's Prime Minister has described the relationship from chip to ship. Right? So we are cooperating in a range of areas, for example, from semiconductors to shipbuilding. Right? So this is the gamut of relation that we have with Republic of Korea. Now, if you look at some of the important aspects, the static aspects of India, Republic of South Korea, so the special strategic partnership was established in 2015. But before that, you should know that India and South Korea did not have any sort of diplomatic ties till 1970s. Right? Because of several reasons. So because the most important reason for this was India was a major component or a major country which was mediating this Korean War, right? The Korean War happened from 1950 to 1953, okay? And largely, India was neutral in this. India was neutral in this, and India did not want to have some kind of position that would adversely impact any of the country. And as you all know that the North Korea was supported by USSR and South Korea was led or supported by US, right? And the division happened along the 38th parallel. And South Korea was not happy with India because South Korea thought that India was a pro-communist country, because India was the only country, non-communist country, that had recognized the People's Republic of China during that time. So as per South Korea, India was a heavily communist supporting country, and it wanted to have not particular relation with India, right? So under the leadership change, then South Korea started to reach out to India, and especially after 1962 war. Because China was aggressive and it was following its muscular policy even during that time. And then India and South Korea started to come together, and only later India and South Korea started to have diplomatic ties, right? So this was a major transition towards the relationship, and then as we have discussed, our areas of cooperation have increased. It started with economic ties, but then it transgressed into the defense ties, and later it has also moved to cultural ties. So in a way, we can say that we have a comprehensive partnership with South Korea. Now here, the bilateral trade as of now is $27 billion, and the target is to take it to $54 billion by 2030. Now this is a very small number compared to the complementarities that we have, and the other problem with this is that it is in favor of South Korea, right? And India faces a trade deficit of $15.519 billion. Now, a major reason behind this trade deficit, as per some of the analysts, is because of a trade agreement that India signed in 2010, and that was Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, as such, Comprehensive Economic Partnership is beyond FTA, because in FTA or free trade agreement, largely it is about lowering of duties on the goods, right? But CEPA is a more comprehensive, more inclusive arrangement, which includes not just goods, but it also includes services, it also includes investment, it also includes labor mobility, right? But the point is that the CEPA is largely balanced in favor of South Korea, and therefore there is a lot of political capital which is going to have revision of this agreement. So India has successfully made South Korea agreed to renegotiation of the CEPA, and essentially this is also going to help India, especially with respect to its export balance, because most of the times South Korea is imposing non-tariff barriers on the Indian products. So the non-tariff barriers makes Indian goods inaccessible in South Korea, and that is why India is seeking a major revision of CEPA. Next, with respect to defense, we have a 2020 roadmap to defense industry cooperation, and then K9 Vajra Howitzer. Very important development here. We have seen very much success being built in India via technologies transferred by South Korean firm. Then there is a defense accelerator project which is called as KINDX, that is Korea India Accelerator. So it is essentially to support the startup in the both countries, to connect startups and investors, right? So we have seen the nature of relationship. We have also looked into the issues. So these two are some of the major issues. Along with that, there's also problem with respect to how they are interacting with countries such as US and China, okay? So these are the major areas of cooperation and some of the issues that India is facing with South Korea. So let's start with the next topic, which is recent explosion at fireworks unit in Tamil Nadu had claimed many lives. And this topic would be part of GS Paper 3, Disaster Management. And unfortunately, more than 54 lives have been lost in a district called Virudhunagar in Tamil Nadu, southern Tamil Nadu, right? And it has been called by the Hindu not as an accident, okay, but a gross misuse or gross political negligence, right? Now, the problem here is this is an example of industrial accident, and we have several examples in the past as well, okay? So largely we need to understand why these industrial accidents keep on happening despite so many provisions that we have, right? And what happened in this particular case. So in this particular case, there were two major challenges or events that were witnessed. The first thing was that the unit was open on Sunday, which ideally it should not be, because all the firework units are supposed to be closed on Sunday, right? But it was open on Sunday without any permission. This was one of the major lapses. The second major lapse was with respect to the capacity. Now, in general, not more than 20 workers are allowed in this region, right? Because this area requires a lot of safety norms, right? But in that particular day, more than 40 people were present. Again, there was no permission sought for this. So we can see that because of such grave misutilization or implementation of the safety norms and poor safety norms or poor safeguards or scrutiny by the fire department, etc., this event or this accident took place, right? Again, as per the Hindu, this cannot be considered as an accident, because accident implies some sort of suddenness, right? Some sort of things that catch you by surprise. But here, everything is out there in the open, that if it is a firework place, definitely if you are not adhering to the safety guidelines, it is very likely that that some sort of hazard is going to happen or a disaster is likely to happen. And this has happened in the past as well. In fact, as per the report by the Hindu, in the last 4 years, more than 134 people have been killed in similar kind of fire in this area. Now, this is not an exception. We have industrial accidents in several places, especially because of, or in terms of large-scale chemical manufacturing. It has amplified, or it has increased the nature and the scale of the industrial accidents in India. And there are several examples, such as the 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy, which was due to the leakage of methyl isocyanate. Then there was 1985 oleum gas leak in Delhi. Then 2017 NTPC power plant boiler explosion, and then Vizag gas leak in 2020. So we have several examples that happen because of such reasons. Now, what are some of the key causes of industrial accidents? So first is, there is problem of systemic and regulatory issues, which means that there are a lot of measures, or legal vacuum is not there, but the problem is they are not implemented at the ground level. Secondly, there is no monitoring whether the norms have been done or have been followed or not, right? So effective implementation is the most important reason why there is problem. Second reason is due to operational and technical reason. Now, this is something which is because of the fact of human errors. So maybe the human which is operating, or the worker that is operating the machines, does not understand the correct process because he may not be properly skilled. Or it could be genuine human errors. It could be because of engineering design flaws. The reason, or maybe the certain kind of design is required, but because of certain failures, the design is not according to what is to be done. Then poor maintenance. So even if something is done properly, but if it is not maintained and upgraded properly, it can lead to accident. Then protocol violations on factory floor. The third important causes is hazardous material and process related, especially dealing with toxic gases such as chlorine, ammonia, etc. They often operate on narrow margins of safety, right? Then fourthly, there is also environmental factors such as earthquake, tsunami, etc., which can damage the industrial installation. And the primary example for this can be given in terms of the tsunami that happened in Japan. And also in 2001 Gujarat earthquake, it caused spills in certain chemical warehouses. Then the other aspect is with respect to economic and managerial factors, especially because the companies are trying to cut cost, right? And to cut cost, they are ensuring, or they are not making sufficient expenditure on the safety measures. They're also not investing in the modern safety system, the kind of equipments or the kind of uniforms that the workers should be wearing. So again, there is so much cost cutting as well. So you can see that these are the reasons why the industrial accidents happen in India. Now, what are the consequences of this? So there are three major consequences of the industrial accidents. First is with respect to economic consequence or the human health consequence. So the immediate, it leads to death, and human life is very precious. But because of this, precious human lives are lost. Then long term, it also creates the psychological trauma. Those people who have survived, or the family members of the workers who have survived, they often require some sort of psychological counseling. And it also leads to social disruption in terms of the community. Then environmental impact is with respect to the contamination of the natural resources in terms of the released contaminants in the water. It can kill the fishes, etc. Then economic consequences is basically felt in terms of monetary loss, which is at the immediate level, because it is going to have everything has to be rebuilt. Then it also leads to a long-term problem with respect to healthcare for the affected population and loss of investor confidence, right? So there are long-term consequences, maybe because in certain areas in Bhopal, still the effect of the gas leak is continued to felt in various places, right? So again, this is the major consequences that is felt because of the industrial accidents. Now, what are the measures that the government has taken? So first is in terms of law. So what are the legal procedures that the government has taken? So first, government has enacted Environment Protection Act 1986, and that was essentially in direct response to the Bhopal gas tragedy, right? So it essentially talked about what should be the kind of environmental impact of any industrial thing should be, and especially talked about the fact that any polluting industry should be outside the city limit, so that if unfortunately some accident happen, it should not spill over to the nearby areas. Secondly, there is Public Liability Insurance Act 1991. Now, the primary purpose of this act was to ensure that the operator and supplier, they should have some sort of liability in case some a misfortune or accident happens, right? So especially supplier and ensure the operator should have certain liabilities. Then Disaster Management Act 2005 was also passed, essentially to ensure that there is some sort of remedial measures in case the disaster gets struck, or there should be also certain mitigative measures as well. Then apart from that, to realize the goals of the law, institutions were created to ensure that the implementation is done in a free and in a effective manner. For this, NDMA was formed, including at the state level and the district level. Then emergency response. So again, these were both protective and remedial measures. But apart from that, emergency responses were also created in terms of dedicated hazardous material, that is hazmat, response units, right? Then National Disaster Response Force, NDRF, with units trained in chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear emergency response. So these are the emergency response. So immediately where a disaster is struck, then this kind of response is undertaken. Then technological response is in terms of advanced process safety management system. Again, this would be part of the mitigative measure. Then community and healthcare preparedness. So awareness generation is very important so that people are also aware about the kind of safety norm that they should be following, especially in such hazardous condition. So involvement of local public, local crisis groups for information spreading or dissemination, etc. So this is all about the second news. Let's talk about the third news, which is the relevance of ASEAN's partnership model for global cooperation. Now, there was a research paper published recently which talked about how ASEAN is a relevant model for the global cooperation, okay? And it had talked about several challenges that the grouping was facing. And despite these challenges, it continues to be relevant even now. So it talked about two major challenges that it currently faces. First is with respect to the crisis in Myanmar. And the second one is the recent clash between Thailand and Cambodia, which had in a way paralyzed the mechanism of ASEAN. At the same time, it has also congratulated ASEAN in terms of its success in two major areas. One, it has expanded its membership by integrating East Timor or Timor-Leste in its grouping. So now effectively the ASEAN grouping has changed from 10 members to 11 members. Again, a very important development. Then you should also know the second important development is with respect to some sort of digital partnership among the countries. So let us understand the whole matter. So what is the three things? So there is commitment to core beliefs. So ASEAN is governed through a very different sort of norms, which is called as ASEAN Way. And ASEAN Way is primarily about non-interference, and it is also about consensus, so that the bigger powers or the bigger economies do not violate or do not impinge their dealings on the smaller countries, right? So essentially the power is sought to be balanced. It has to be through harmonious manner. And especially despite there is very significant differences in terms of the culture, in terms of the economic size, in terms of the political models, ASEAN has been functioning as a cohesive, viable economic political bloc for almost 60 years. So ASEAN was formed in 1967 under a declaration called Bangkok Declaration. And the founding members were Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Right? So these were the countries which essentially formed the ASEAN group, that is the Association of Southeast Asian Nation in 1967. So you may be surprised that initially India was also invited to be part of ASEAN, but India did not join this because India thought this was very much closer to US, and India at that point of time was following non-alignment. So this was formed, but later you'll see that other countries such as the CLMV countries also joined. So CLMV countries include Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam. Now these countries are the LDCs, or the least or the developing countries of ASEAN. So ASEAN has two types of countries. First is the developed countries, which were the founding members of ASEAN. They started with reforms in their economy, they started export-led growth, etc. And therefore they achieved a lot of economic momentum. And then they had, after 1991, these countries also joined. Plus, apart from that, they have Kingdom of Brunei, and recently East Timor has also joined in 2025. And the model that ASEAN faces is called as ASEAN Way, which is based on two pillars: non-intervention and consensus. Now, this you can compare with EU, countries like, or region models like EU. So EU functions in terms of supranational bodies, or it's a supranational organization of 27 countries, which means that in certain areas, the countries have pooled their sovereignty and they take collective decisions. And it is not necessarily by consensus. It could be through certain majorities. It could be simple majority or special majority. And it has created different organizations for taking decisions in different matters. So it has EU Council, Council of EU, EU Commission, EU Parliament, etc. Now, the ASEAN governance is very much different because it is governed under ASEAN Way. So it has continued to commit to its core beliefs. The second important development or achievement is it has mutually supported and trust. So because of that, Timor-Leste or East Timor has joined ASEAN in 2025, and this shows, or this is an example of how members, especially Indonesia, can put aside years of enmity for the mutual support and growth for the entire bloc. So East Timor is the newest democracy because it was formed 14 years before, and now it has joined ASEAN. This signifies how it is functioning. Next, it is also improving the wider integration. So now they are integrating in different manner, and this framework, Digital Economic Framework Agreement, represents an example of coalition of smaller economies to accelerate digital transformation throughout the region. In fact, the digital transformation project is being seen across different countries and regions. Even Africa has a digital transformation strategy of 2020 to 2030, right? So this is something which is, again, a very interesting one because EU already has a digital single economic framework, right? So EU also has a digital single economy, and now ASEAN has also stuck with this framework. Next, what are the other key benefits of regional integration? So this is first talking about ASEAN in particular, and now this is extending the other arguments. For example, we all know that intra-SAARC trade is very less, right? It is less than 5%. On the other hand, with EU, European Union, it is more than 70% or 60%. And with ASEAN, it is more than 25%. But when it comes to India, and especially South Asia, it is very less. So the point is that it helps in better market access and it improves input cost, right? Second, it also creates regional stability. So the Southeast Asian countries have started this initiative of Chiang Mai Initiative, which is nothing but a currency swap agreement that was signed as after the event of the Asian financial crisis of 1997. Then there is another arrangement called APT, that is ASEAN plus 3. So the 11 members of ASEAN plus 3 more members, China, Japan, and South Korea. Apart from that, there is another arrangement, that is AP6, ASEAN plus 6. Now ASEAN plus 6 will be APT, that is the ASEAN plus 3 plus India, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay, and then there is another organization called East Asia Summit. So East Asia Summit will be AP6. See all the members. So here 11 plus 3 14 plus 3 17 plus 2 more members, US plus Russia. So again, a very important development. And in the East Asian Summit itself, India had announced the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative. Okay. So this is one initiative. Then there is ADMM, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, and ADMM Plus, which is essentially to harmonize their security and defense relations. Apart from that, ASEAN also has ARF, that is ASEAN Regional Forum, which is essentially a security-based organization. So this is how the regional integration can cover different areas of cooperation, not just economic cooperation, but it can transgress into, so again, the AP6 is the area which ASEAN has signed free trade agreement with. Again, a very important development. Then it is also going to reduce income inequality between countries, because it will lead to free trade and factor mobility, that is mobility of labor and capital from, it will allow the less developed members like the CLMV countries to grow faster. Then it will also provide for political stability and collective bargaining, because the countries would want to conduct elections and would want to be part of this ASEAN structure in order to be part of the collective ASEAN, right? So it strengthens diplomatic relation and increases the influence of member state in global trade negotiation. So these are some of the important benefits of regional integration, especially from the perspective of ASEAN. And models we have already discussed. There are two kinds of models of regional integration. One is the politically anchored regional integration. The primary example of this would be EU, right? So European Union is a primary example of that, which is basically requires political commitment and shared medium to long-term economic vision. So here you have EU single market, African continental free trade area, Eurasian free economic union in Central Asia, right? All these would be part of regional integration that is backed by the political players. And now here it is the market driven would be the private sector is essentially more prominent here. So here the ASEAN would be considered as part of the flexible market driven, where there is not much institutional role, but largely it is done in more non-interference and incentivization kind of thing. So here we have two models of regional integration. So from this, UPSC asked a question in 2018, and that was very strange because this was about the free trade agreement of not India, but with ASEAN, right? So which among the following are the free trade partners of ASEAN? We have already discussed it. It is AP6, right? So ASEAN plus 3 plus 3. So which country is not part of ASEAN plus 6? You can easily find out. It is Canada, and Canada would not be there, plus US will also not be there. So definitely Australia, China, India, Japan would be here, okay? Next topic is world rapidly progressing towards circular economy. Again, it's a very simple but very profound concept, and this would be part of, and it would be at the intersection of both GS paper 3 environment as well as economy. And the paradigm shift here is from the linear model to circular model. And the idea here is that in the linear model, it is premised on usage of raw materials and manufacture, and then the product is formed, and after that, the product is discarded, right? That leads to waste generation. But in circular economy, the waste that is generated as part of the manufacturing process is reintegrated into the production process. And that is why it is called as a circular economy. Now, the government has been promoting this model for a very long time. And now government has stated that because of usage of circular economy, it has earned more than 4,000 crore rupees, including the e-waste during the Swachhta campaign. So what it indicates is that not only the circular economy appears to be beneficial from the perspective of environmental sustainability, but it also generates a lot of resources, and it also would create a lot of employment. So let us look into some of the numbers. So we have already discussed the idea of circular economy. The potential is that it could generate a market value of over 2 trillion economy and create close to 10 million jobs by 2050. Again, a very huge number. Then what are the key benefits? It reduces waste generation, it preserves the natural capital, right? And it reduces raw material dependence, it creates jobs, etc. So these are some of the important benefits. Now, what are the challenges? So again, the benefits are profound, but what is stopping India from realizing it? So a couple of things. First is, we do not have a very efficient waste collection system. And now, to collect waste very properly, we need to segregate them in terms of different waste. But there is very lack of the awareness in terms of waste segregation is very limited in India. So this is one of the major challenge with respect to circular economy. Secondly, once we have very limited waste collection, there's also limited availability of the recycled material. And because of that, the businesses have to rely on the virgin materials or the naturally or the new materials. The third problem is with respect to downcycling. And what exactly is the meaning of downcycling? It means that the process of recycling materials into products, it leads to products of lower value and quality. So in a way, the whole purpose, it becomes downcycled. Other problem is with respect to limited research and development, absence of a multi-stakeholder level. Basically means that we should also be including the local level player and especially the citizens themselves as part of this circular economy. So what can be done or what has been done with respect to circular economy in India? So with respect to that, at the political level, we have National Resource Efficiency Policy, which essentially talks about how we should be utilizing the raw materials in the form of the waste and how we should be ensuring it for better utilization. Then there is a framework for extended producer liability EPR, which is essentially for collection of the e-waste or hazardous material by the producer themselves. And this is essentially to ensure that it is not suspended or it is not discarded in the environment without processing it, right? So it is again a very important component of promoting circular economy in the country. So apart from the policy measures, we have certain enabling schemes as well, such as Swachh Bharat Mission, which has a vision of making India zero waste country, right? Then Atal Innovation Mission, which is supporting the development of the circular business model. So what can be the business model that could link different stakeholders together? Then the other aspect is with respect to research and development. So for this, we have a circular economy cell at the Indian think tank Niti Aayog, which is specializing with working on tires, e-waste and scrap metals. Then at the sector level, we also have certain policies such as steel scrap recycling policy, MSE-led scheme for promotion and investment in circular economy, that is called MSE SPICE, then Ecomark rules. And lastly, we also have a certain declaration and global efforts as well in terms of Jaipur Declaration at the 12th Regional 3R and Circular Economy Forum. Then Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment, etc. are the global initiative that India has taken. So this is about the fourth news. Let's talk about the next news, that is India's forest could nearly double their carbon storage capacity by 2100. Okay, so this is part of GS paper 3 environment, and this is as per the report published in a paper, scientific journal, which talked about the impact of climate change will not just be felt on in terms of the temperature, but it will also have a profound impact on the how the vegetation would be formed in India, right? So here it has talked about two things, that there's going to be a huge formation or of trees or vegetation in the country, and this is going to be precipitated by two factors. One is the increased carbon dioxide. So the increased carbon dioxide will lead to more photosynthesis, and because of that more trees would be formed. Secondly, because of several models have suggested that there's going to be a higher release of rainfall, and because of that there would be going to be increased moisture content, and that will be beneficial for the trees at large. So in a way, the report says that there's going to be a huge increase in the vegetation cover, and because of that there's going to be a higher carbon capture and utilization from these forests. Secondly, this predicted increase in the vegetation is based on different models. So if the emission continues at a low level, that is 35% to 97%, they have mapped it out, right? And the major areas where it will be covered or where the vegetation will be found will not be found in the areas which is already very green, but they will be formed in certain areas which are arid and semi-arid margins, such as Rajasthan, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and also Madhya Pradesh, right? So basically here, the 60% growth is going to happen, right? Now, this report essentially it is also a warning statement. It says that yes, there's going to be more vegetation as an outcome of higher CO2 and higher rainfall, but at the same time, we should not consider this to be something written on stone, right? It is going to depend on the kind of human interference as well, because of the fact that deforestation may happen, because land use change may also happen, and also there can also be some natural disasters such as earthquake or maybe forest fire. Because of that, many of the carbon sinks can be destroyed. So this report is essentially a warning signal that yes, we have a capacity for huge vegetation coverage, but at the same time, it should be taken with a pinch of salt. Now, this is very much different from what the official estimate has been provided by the Indian State of Forest report. So it says that the total forest carbon stock has risen from 6.94 billion tons in 2013 to 7.29 billion tons in 2023. So this number is not that increasing, and based on that, if you do a linear expansion, the carbon dioxide sequestration number will also be lesser here. Secondly, the total forest and tree cover has been increased to 25.17% of India's geographical area. And in terms of India's nationally determined contribution, we have aimed to create carbon sink through forest and tree cover to 3.4 to 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2035 from 2005 level. So this is India's target of creating carbon sink. So in a way, the study says that we are in the right track, but at the same time, the human elements have to be undertaken. Now, what are the key initiatives for increasing India's carbon storage? So we have Green India Mission, which is to expand the forest area or the tree cover by 5 million hectares. Then National Afforestation Program, which is for ecological restoration of the degraded forest. So this is National Afforestation Program. Then Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, that is CAMPA. And this is to ensure to compensate forest land due to the diversion of forest to non-forest resources. Then others are Tree Outside Forest in India program, Bond Challenge Commitment, and Submission for Agroforestry, Green Credit Program, Nagar Van Yojana, that is about urban forestry, etc. So we have several measures to create or to promote the carbon storage. What carbon storage basically means, that we are promoting trees and various forest areas through all such measures. Okay. So now let's start with place in news, and for this we have Japan. And why it was in news? Because a powerful earthquake of magnitude 7.5 was struck off in the northern coast of Japan, this place. Now, we all know that Japan experiences frequent seismic activity because of its location along the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now, if you look at the political features of Japan, one thing that you would realize that it is an island country, an island country which does not share any land boundary with any of its neighbor, right? So this is one thing. Secondly, it is situated in East Asia. So we know about ASEAN, that is in Southeast Asia. In East Asia, we have countries like Japan, the Koreas, the North Korea and South Korea, and also China and Taiwan, Republic of Taiwan as a region, right? So we have these countries or regions as part of East Asia, right? So it is an island consisting of or archipelago consisting of over 14,000 islands, and largely these islands are grouped under four major islands. They are Hokkaido, Honshu. So Honshu Islands are the group of islands are the largest one, Shikoku and Kyushu. So there are four island groups. And maritime boundary here at the eastern side is Pacific Ocean, this one. Then north-south is Sea of Ostock. Then west side is Sea of Japan, also called as East Sea, and southwest is East China Sea. In terms of the climate, it varies from subarctic in the north, right? So this is subarctic, very cold temperature, to humid subtropical in the south. The highest peak is Mount Fuji. You may have heard about this. It's an iconic stratovolcano. That is a layered volcano. And the rivers, it has Shinano, Tone, and Kiso. Shinano River is the longest river. Again, this is some kind of factual questions can be asked in your prelims exam. Let us now go to the quick updates. So the first news is with respect to Breakthrough Prize. And recently, Breakthrough Prize was announced for the 2026 laureates. And Breakthrough Prize is called as the Oscar of Science because it recognizes the world's top scientists working in fundamental sciences. The fundamental science are generally your life sciences, that is biology, your fundamental physics and mathematics, right? And here the prize money is $3 million. And if you look at Nobel Prize, it is approximately $1 billion. So it is $1 million. So it is approximately 3 times more than the Nobel Prize, if I'm correct. Then, in addition, the New Horizons in Physics and Mathematics Prize and Mariam New Frontiers Prize are awarded to early career advancers. Now, interestingly, the selection committee is not bureaucratic at all. It is basically composed of those people who have already won the prize. Then the 2026 prize recognizes achievement in sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia, then development of Casgevy, first CRISPR-based medicinal treatment, and evolution of waves over time. So again, these developments would become important from the perspective of science and technology. Next news is with respect to a survey conducted by MOSPI, that is Household Social Consumption. This report was released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation and was conducted from January to December under the 80th round of National Sample Survey. Again, not that required, just you need to know which ministry has conducted this. Then, what are the key findings? Again, here you just need to understand the pattern. So, about 13% persons reported suffering from some ailments, including chronic ailments during the last 15 days, okay? Second, hospitalization rate was highest in the age group 60 years. It is not surprising, or more. The rate was 8.1%. Now, this is very interesting that reporting of infectious diseases decreased, while the non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and thyroid disorders have increased. So now a new trend has happened where the communicable diseases, infectious diseases has decreased, but the communicable or the non-communicable disease which does not spread through infection have increased. Then cardiovascular and endocrine metabolic diseases most frequently reported after 30 years of age. Then nearly universal institutional deliveries, which is again a very important development, which signifies that 96% of the childbirth were reported. Again, a very welcome development. Then health insurance coverage has expanded, and in a good news, it is done more in the rural areas than the urban areas, where majority enrollments has been in the government-sponsored scheme. So again, these are some of the key findings which could come as a statement with respect to India's health consumption or health social consumption with respect to health. So just you need to know the trend, that would be more than sufficient. No need to know the exact number. Next news is with respect to another very interesting report by Niti Aayog, that is on Herfindahl Harsh Man Index, right? So again, it's a report from Niti Aayog has published Trade Watch Quarterly. The HHI for exporters are falling. Now, what exactly is this Herfindahl and Harsh Man Index, that is HHI? It essentially checks to what extent your exports are concentrated in one area, right? So for example, if all of India's exports are concentrated in the West Asian side, then India would get a very high HHI, okay? And if India's exports are diversified in various regions, for example, for something India is using West Asia, then it is diversified to ASEAN or US, etc., then India's HHI would be reduced, which signifies now a lower HHI indicates that India's export things are diversified in nature, right? So higher HHI values indicate greater concentration and lower it indicates diversification. So for India also, HHI has been falling, which means that India's exports are now getting diversified. Again, a very good news. Other key highlights from the report that the gem and jewelry sector, India's exports represent 7.8% share of the global market. Now, this is important because the gems and jewelry sector is a labor-intensive sector, and it has potential to create even more jobs. Now, instability in the West Asia has slowed India Gulf Cooperation Council Free Trade Agreement cooperation. So again, these two developments. Then marine spatial planning. So Odisha has become the first state in India to launch MSP, that is Marine Spatial Planning. It has signed an MOU with National Center for Coastal Research, Ministry of Earth Sciences. And earlier, the MSP was held with two UTs, that is Puducherry and Lakshadweep. And this was done as part of Indo-Norway Integrated Ocean Initiative of 2019. Okay. So what is MSP, the Marine Spatial Planning? It is a public process of analyzing the spatial and temporal distribution of human activity. So basically what it does, it analyzes where all the maritime activities are being conducted. What are the location used for? And then it provides for some efficient location or the efficient areas to ensure that there is some sort of best result in terms of economical objective. It is also ecologically fine, and it also leads to social objectives. For example, it will also lead to job creation, right? So ultimately, in very simple terms, what MSP is basically about process of understanding how best to utilize the marine areas so that it fulfills three major objectives: economic objectives, for example, creation of growth; social objectives in creation of employment; and ecological objective of sustainable development and protecting the environment, right? So what are the significance? It boosts blue economy by enabling the sustainable utilization of the resources. It helps in better policy formulation by allocating space for offshore wind energy plants, deep sea mining, etc. And it also strengthens climate resilience because environmental consideration are also integrated within this. Then Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, UNESCO, is developing key guidelines and supports implementation of MSP across countries. Next is about non-deliverable forwards. So recently RBI on April 1 had withdrawn this measure called non-deliverable forwards on the rupee derivative trades, allowing authorized dealers to offer. And now just today RBI has permitted a partial restatement of NDF. So what we need to understand from the prelims is the idea behind NDF. So what exactly it is? So it is a forward, right? So forward is some sort of agreement to be conducted in the future. Okay. Now it is traded, it is a cash settled over the counter foreign exchange derivative with no physical change of currency at maturity. So basically what happens is, if any investor or if anyone wants to buy a phone from US in dollar 1 month after that, but the person knows that within 1 month the currency can fluctuate. So they can go for a non-deliverable forward so that only the limited amount of changes would be taken into account. Okay. So here also, the idea is to offset the fluctuation of the currency, especially of the developing countries such as India, China, Brazil, etc. Right? And it is traded offshore basically at the areas where the thing is done, such as in Singapore, Dubai, London, and New York. Then the purpose of NDF is to hedge or speculate on currencies from the emerging market that have capital control or restricted liquidity. It is settled in cash at the contract's maturity and based on the difference between contract rate and the spot rate, right? So it is not the wholesome change of transfer of money happens, only the difference is traded, okay? Next is about Samriddhi Gyan Gram initiative. And why it was in news? Because the Samriddhi Gram initiative was nominated for a very prestigious WSIS prize, that is World Summit on the Information Society, under the Enabling Environment category. So what exactly it is? It is an integrated phygital. So this is a combination of physical and digital. Phygital service delivery model, again a very important model of delivery management which you can incorporate in your mains answers as well. So this is under Ministry of Communication. It is built on the backbone of BharatNet. So BharatNet is about providing connectivity to the rural areas, especially the constructing the rural kiosks, etc. It enables Samriddhi Kendras. For example, we have common service centers to help provide internet services in such places where there is lack of internet connectivity. So here a specific service center has been launched which are called as Samriddhi Kendras. And they are integrated phygital, that is physical and digital services are provided. So it provides rural citizens access to essential services like health, like education, etc. Now what about WSIS? It is a two-phase multi-stakeholder summit fostering digital development and inclusive development information society. So basically it is about promoting information societies. It has two tracks, Geneva phase that established the foundational agreement or framework, and then you have Tunis phase which focused on the implementation and established the Tunis agenda that created the Internet Governance Forum. Again, this fact could be essential for your prelims exam. And it is one of the lead UN agency that is governed by International Telecommunication Union, which is one of the UN-led systems. Next is the last news is about Jamun. And according to a report, it has been said that Jamun has also originated much earlier than what was previously understood. And India had played a very significant role in the evolutionary history according to a news history. So basically what it means is that Jamun's origin has now been decoded to be from way before it was earlier, and where India had also played a very important role. Now what exactly is Jamun? It's distributed, it is native to the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. It is widely found in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. What are the climatic conditions which are suitable for Jamun? It is evergreen tea that thrives in tropical and subtropical climates. So definitely it will be also found in India. It is tolerant to water logging and salinity, suitable for agroforestry and afforestation program. And what is the significance here? The seeds and bark has been used in Ayurveda and especially for managing diabetes, right? So this was all about news today for today. I hope this was useful. Thank you and all the best.